All right, hello and welcome again to another video. This time around, we're going to talk about how to turn your old printer, like the one I have here in the background, from a simple USB printer to an Airprint or wireless capable printer using nothing but a Raspberry Pi Zero W. Let's get going. All right, now to get your Raspberry Pi, go to raspberrypi.org and then click on all products and then scroll down until you find uh, the Raspberry Pi Zero W product, right? Don't pick the Raspberry Pi Zero, which is down here, right? Because that's not wireless enabled. You want to pick the one with the W at the end. Click on more info, and then you can go ahead and click on buy now, and that will take you to the approved resellers in your country. In this case, I'm in the Philippines, so I get the approved resellers in the Philippines. Now I'm just going to click on Citron over here, which will take me to their website, and that's where I can purchase the Raspberry Pi Zero W. And there are also a number of other accessories here that are available, but yeah. That's basically how you're going to get your hands on this product. All right, so here is the Raspberry Pi Zero W, where W stands for wireless, and it's Wi-Fi capable. And so you just connect it to your wireless network, and then you're good to go, right? Now, the Pi Zero W has 3 ports over here. The first one is the mini HDMI. Being a mini HDMI, you can't directly connect it to your HDMI monitor. You're going to need an adapter for it, and I have one right here, right? So it's an HDMI to a mini HDMI adapter, and you're going to connect it right there, and now you can connect it to an HDMI monitor. Now, note, by the way, that since we're building a print server here, we don't really need this permanently. We're only going to need this during the initial installation. So when we're done with that, we can remove it, and then we will have a Pi Zero that's just connected to other things, right? So here's another thing, another port, which is the power in. And the power in port is a micro USB port, which you can just connect to any micro USB charger. By the way, here's an example. Quite short, but it's just an example, right? So you connect it there to your micro USB, and then that one, the other end, would connect to a power adapter, right? And then the second port, or the final port, is the USB port, which you can connect to peripherals like a keyboard, or in our case, the printer, right? Now note that most printers actually have a USB 1 cable, right, where the other end is the standard big USB connector. Of course, you can't connect it directly like that, so you're gonna have to buy an adapter, and this adapter has a male micro USB end and a female USB end, right? And you connect the female end to your USB cable, and then the other end gets connected to the micro USB port in the Pi Zero, right? So it's connected like that, and that's how it goes, right? So in the end, those two things would be the permanent setup: the USB cable leading to the printer, right? And then the other one would be the power in, right? Interesting thing to note about the power capability of this is that it actually just consumes about 170 milliamps when Wi-Fi is turned on, or about 1.1 watts of power. So any 5-volt adapter that can provide at least 500 milliamps, usually you'll find 1000 milliamps, but as long as it's more than what the Pi Zero needs, you're fine. Now you could use it as is, right, without anything encasing it. But it doesn't look good, and also there's no protection around very sensitive parts that you have here, so you might want to buy a case for this. And right over here I have a starter kit, or a starter pack, that I bought from a company called Adafruit, which sells a number of things, including Raspberry Pi products, right? So this starter pack that I bought actually contains a number of things, and here's one of them. This is the casing that is available for a Pi Zero. So you're gonna need to look at those 4 pegs over there and align it with the holes of the Raspberry Pi Zero, right? So we align it over there, and then we just snap that shut, right? And there we go. That's snugly fit into the casing, and then we can now enclose it. Now we can choose to use this enclosure, which exposes the GPIO slots over there. But if you're not going to use those, then just use the full cover, right? So let's do that. And there we go. That's a very nice, clean casing and anti-slip feet, actually, right? So we can continue with our connection. But before we do that, let's take a look at what the starter pack also continues. So the another important component over here is our SD card, right? Now for the Raspberry Pi Zero, it requires a micro SD card, right? Which is right here, right? Now that's what you insert, the micro SD card, into the Pi Zero. However, if you have a laptop that only has an SD card slot, then you want to use this adapter to bake in the operating system, the Raspberry Pi operating system, into the micro SD card, right? Now, if you do have a micro SD slot, then you can use that directly. Now, once it's properly set up, installed, then we can put that in there, and then we then put it back, make sure to align the pegs into the 4 holes that we have in our Pi Zero, right? Snap that shut, and then back to our Pi casing, right? All right, what else do we have over here? So there's a ribbon cable that can be used if you want to control other devices other than a printer, right? We also have a no IR, no infrared camera, perfect for night vision security cameras. There's an extra ribbon to extend the distance of or the reach of the camera. We also have this USB to TTL serial cable that you can use, right? And then a few other things, a few other remaining stuff is it also comes with a USB to micro USB cable. And then finally, some GPIO pins right here. So you can use those to attach to our GPIO slots, right? Either at the top or at the bottom, right? Depends on your needs, actually. So that'll allow you to control other devices other than a printer. So this thing is very versatile, actually. Now the casing that I use, however, is this one. I like this. It's still from Adafruit, right? I like this because it exposes the internals of the Pi Zero, which I think is pretty cool. Like this is a powerful computer, by old standards at least. But more importantly, I can remove and reattach the micro SD card without having to open up the casing like this one, right? Now, if you have no plans of removing or reattaching the micro SD card, then the standard one is probably good enough. But this one is my favorite. All right, so now we're back in the Raspberry Pi website, and this time we're going to download the operating system that's needed for the Raspberry Pi Zero to run. So we just head on to the software page, and then there is this Raspberry Pi OS imager that we can download, which I already have running over here. What we're going to use is the Raspberry Pi OS Lite because we're just going to use our Raspberry Pi as a printer or a print server, and we don't need any desktop environment for that. We're going to use the command line interface the whole time. So we're going to pick the OS Lite now. All right, so we picked the OS Lite, and now my micro SD card, which I've already attached to my laptop, is there. And then I just click on yes, input my admin password and my laptop, and then that should continue to write the operating system, the Raspberry Pi OS, into the micro SD card. And that's it. And now we're back to our Raspberry Pi Zero, and our operating system is now baked into the micro SD card. So we're now going to insert that into the micro SD slot, and then put our Pi Zero back into its very nice casing over here. Right. If I can put that in properly, yeah. Make sure to line up those holes with the 4 pegs, and then that should be a snug fit. All right, and we close that. There we go. And now we're ready to proceed to the next step, which is to configure the operating system. Now, in order for us to do that, we need a couple of things, and these are going to be temporary. We're only going to need this during the operating system installation and configuration. So first is the keyboard. We are going to use that USB to micro USB adapter that we showed earlier, right? We attach the female end to the USB keyboard, and then we're going to attach the male end, the micro USB end, to the USB port. Now make sure you attach it to the USB port, right? Which has that USB symbol, not the power port. All right, so that goes in there. And then we're also going to need a power supply. But before that, we're going to attach a monitor to our Pi Zero. And this one, I have a tiny monitor that's built for the Raspberry Pi, actually, and I use this a lot for a number of my experiments. So we're going to use it this time. And again, since it's an HDMI monitor, we're going to need this HDMI converter, and then attach that like so, right? And that's going to be temporary, because we're not going to need the monitor during the normal operations of our print server once this is properly configured, right? Okay, so the last thing that we need is a power adapter or power connector. So we're going to attach it now to the power port, and we should see the Raspberry Pi Zero come to life in a few seconds. Here we go. Now it's noticed that the file system size has been resized because we're using a larger micro SD storage than what it expects, so it resizes its root file system automatically. And now it's booting up, and then we'll soon get to the login prompt in a bit. All right, so we're now ready to log into our newly minted Raspberry Pi Zero. The default username is Pi, right? And then the default password is Raspberry. We can change that later on if we want, but we'll just go with the defaults for now. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to run a built-in command called raspi config, right? So sudo raspi config, and then we are going to configure the wireless LAN right here. So it's going to ask me which country the Pi is going to be used from, and we're going to say Philippines. All right. Click OK, and then now we enter the wireless SSID, or the Wi-Fi name, into here. So you want to type this usually in all caps, otherwise it's not going to work. Or type it in small caps if you want, and if that doesn't work, try it again with all caps, right? So, and now we're gonna type in the password for our Wi-Fi. And while we're here, let's also adjust the keyboard configuration, because Raspberry Pi being a UK company, the keyboard configuration is default set to default, Great Britain. So we want to change that to the US because, well, that's the keyboard layout that I'm using. So I'm going to click on Other. And then I'm going to click on English US, and then I am going to go to the top and click just that entry, and then just click OK on these two parts over here. And then we're good to go. We should be done. We click on Finish, and then it's going to ask us if we want to reboot. Yes, we want to reboot. Now it's rebooting, and then we should be back in the login again. We log in as Pi, password is Raspberry, and then we're going to check our IP address, and we can see that our wireless LAN now has an IP address assigned, 192.168.86.51. Cool. So we need to add another thing over here using the same tool, raspbiconfig. What we want to do is add the SSH server, because the rest of the configuration we want to do, or at least I want to do in my workstation and not through this interface over here, because this is too tiny for me, right? So SSH allows me to connect remotely to my Raspberry Pi Zero. All right, so now before we go back to my workstation, right, we're going to reattach or remove the monitor from the Raspberry Pi, and now I'm going to attach the printer directly to the Pi Zero, so that we can continue on with the configuration in my workstation via SSH, right? So that's the final setup of the Pi Zero, the physical setup at least, right? Very neat. You can tuck it away behind the printer, and yeah, that looks good. So now here we are. This is a very quick guide on how to set up the cups server in our Raspberry Pi. This will be the application that we will use to be able to wirelessly print via our workstation. Now I'm going to share a link to this one later on in the description. So once you're done with this video, go ahead and look at the description for a link to this website. All right, so first thing that we need to do is we need to SSH to the machine, and this is the IP address of my Raspberry Pi, so I SSH to that. And then the next thing that it says that we need to do is we need to run sudo apt-get update, so that we can get the latest list of packages that are available to the Pi. So I'm just gonna copy this part over here, go back to the terminal, and then that will update the packages that are available to the Pi. And then I'm going to install cups. And then while we're here, I'm also going to install Vim, because that's the text editor that I prefer. But I mean, you could use your own text editor really if you want. The next up is to create a backup of the default cupsd config, because in case we mess things up, then we still have a backup of that configuration file. Now it says over here to run sudo nano and then path to the config file, but I prefer Vim, so I'm just going to copy this part. All right, I mean, you can use nano if you want, but you know, I'm just more comfortable with Vim. All right, so we're in the configuration file, and it says over here to look for this piece of configuration and replace it with this, right? So we're going to look for that over here, and then that's the place, and it says to comment that out, right? And then replace that with the configuration port 631. So that basically tells cupsd to listen to all interfaces, not just the local interface for any requests. And now I also, this part tells me to add allow at local to the line below order allow comma deny. So we're going to look for that, and we find one over here in this location segment. So we're just going to copy that, and then we're going to paste it down here, or type. And we're going to do that again in these other location sections, and that's about it. So it says now that we need to restart cupsd, but before we do that, let's save the changes, and then copy this part, right? And then it'll restart cupsd with the new configuration. And so now I should be able to browse to the cupsd user interface through my browser. So I just type in the IP address of my Pi Zero, port 631, of course, and we get the cups admin interface. Now I want to add the printer now, so I click on Add Printer, right? Click on that, and it says I must access it via HTTPS, so I click on that, and I click it again, and it's going to ask for my username and password, which is, of course, right now, default to Pi with password Raspberry, right? And it tells me that I am forbidden from accessing that, and I think that's because I forgot to add the Pi user to the LP admin group. As you can see over here, there's a command that we forgot to run. So that command, right? We're just going to run that back in our terminal. And that should be it. If we refresh this page, then we should be able to access the add printer interface. There we go. And notice that it's already detected the local printer here, which is the Epson L120 series that I have connected earlier, if you remember. So we're just going to select that and click on continue. And then it's going to ask for some information like the name, description, location. I'm just going to say this is located in my home office. So I type home office in the location. Doesn't really matter what you put in there, but something easy to remember or something useful is important. Of course, you got to click the share this printer. Otherwise, you can't print from your other devices, right? And so we click on continue. And then it's going to ask for the driver or the model of the printer. And of course, we're going to pick Epson L120 and then click on Add Printer. Up next, it's going to ask for some default for the printer. And I just, I continue and I just set default options unless there's some good reason that you want to modify that. So now we're ready to go. And our printer is over here. And any jobs that we that get added to the printer will show up in this page. So let's print that guide that we had earlier. And notice that by now, my MacBook already recognized the shed printer, so I can directly print from that. All right, click on print. And if we go back to the CUPS interface and then refresh the page, we should see it working on that print job. And here's that print job done, right? So wirelessly printed from my MacBook. Pretty cool. Now let's try printing from my iPhone, right? So I'm just gonna create. I'm full on nerd, so of course I have to use Hello World, right? And then I'm going to print this page over here. I need to select a printer, right? And as you can see, the iPhone detects that automatically. And then I am going to go and print it, and there we go. Hello World, right off the bat. All right, so there you go. That's how you set up your Raspberry Pi Zero W to be an Airprint or wireless printer. Now, the demo that I've showed you so far only shows printing from my MacBook and my iPhone, and that's only because I don't have any other peripheral or devices over here like an Android, right? But for sure you can use an Android, at least version Oreo and later should be able to use this printer. If you want to use a Windows PC, I think you're going to need to install a Samba service into the Pi Zero, which is I believe is mentioned in the guide that I showed earlier. And so you can, just click on that link and then follow the guide, and then it'll get you to a position where you can print wirelessly from your Windows machines. All right, so there you go. That's how you turn a $10 computer, right, into a wireless print server, and then turn your old printer into a wireless printer, without buying a new one. Yeah, so I hope you found this useful. If you did, hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Jeez, finally said it. But anyway, yeah, you have a good one. Have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.